Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you a game, or more accurately I should say a game system that I first encountered in the very early 2000s, might have actually been the year 2000 itself, that started a long and beautiful friendship that continued on in my gaming collection. And I'm speaking, of course, of Avalanche Press's Great War at Sea series. And in particular, I've chosen this one, the Jutland edition, the war in the North Sea and the Baltic in the First World War, because out of the many volumes that this game system has spawned, and there are really a lot of them over the last 20-something years, the company has made a lot. But this was always my favorite. Now, just to clarify, this is actually a more recent edition. The version I bought was from about the year 2000 and had very different artwork and very different graphics, but it is essentially at its heart the same game. Now, this is a really comprehensive naval game that allows players to command basically the entirety of the fleets committed to the campaigns in and around this area during this period. But it also goes beyond that. There are a lot of counters in this game, not just ships, but aircraft, various other bits of information. And it's one of those gems, I mean, it's in good company out there, but it's one of those gems that is both a strategic and a tactical game at the same time. So let's see if I can give you a bit of a perspective of what you get in the box. So as you can see here, there's a big strategic map of the North Sea area. You get the British Isles, you get the North German and Danish coastline, bits of Scandinavia and Russian territory. And this is the map that you would use in the game to maneuver your ships. These would be represented by task force counters. Now, a bit more close up, you can see that there are samples of the ship counters. And I'm going to go into a bit more detail about what those are in a minute. But as you can see, it's not a bad looking game. It's fairly colourful from the looks of it, and you get to basically fight most of the campaigns that either did or could have happened in the context of the First World War, or the period immediately before and immediately after. There are a lot of scenarios in this game. Now, you can imagine me being a bit of a naval buff, the sight of this thing to my undergraduate self, well, not this one, but the same game system, was absolute gold, and I bought it and took it back to my room and ripped it open. The reason I've got the later edition is because a few years back I loaned my original edition to a friend who greatly enjoyed it but hung on to it for quite a long time. And so in 2016, I found myself missing it so much I got this because I had to scratch the itch. So what do you get in this rather chunky box? Let's get it open and have a look. So the first thing that hits one, and it certainly hit me when I opened the box, is the sheer number of ships involved. I mean, the First World War, even if one focuses on the North Sea and the Baltic, it was massive. You've got the bulk of the Royal Navy's strength. You've got the Kaiserliche Marine, the Imperial German Navy. So I, of course, have gone through everything and bagged everything up and punched all the counters out. But just to give you a sense of the scale, this bag, and I hope you can see the mass of counters in there, those are British cruisers of all stripes. Here we have German cruisers and coast defense ships. British dreadnoughts and battle cruisers. British armoured cruisers. I'd evidently separated them out from light cruisers to make my life easier. British monitors and pre-dreadnought battleships. Now, I could go through all the many German bags as well, but I mean, we'd be here for ages. But just in passing, there are the German dreadnoughts. Somewhat fewer of them, but, you know, still an impressive force. But in addition to the primary protagonists, Britain and Germany, you also get this mass. Now, I'm not saying all foreigners look alike. This is the everybody else bag, ranging from Denmark all the way up to the United States and just about everyone in between. The truth is, I ran out of baggies. There are so many ships in this game. And don't even get me started on the aircraft. German Zeppelins, British Naval and Royal Flying Corps aircraft. And when you finally make it through all the ships, there's the little information markers. Now, these are a mix of weather markers, turn markers. The blue ones are Allied fleet markers, and I'll explain what they're for in a minute. Of course, they have their Central Powers equivalents. So you will be lifting counter sheet after counter sheet out of the box. We then come to the strategic map, which is very decently sized. See if I can make myself disappear behind this thing. So you saw what it looked like on the box, but as you can see, it's pretty ginormous. That is quite a decent map indeed, to have spread on your table. But equally, given the scope of the theatre, it's not overwhelmingly huge. The sea zones are clearly marked, and you can see the Central Powers and the Entente fleet markers fit nicely onto these squares. So it's this map that regulates your strategic movement. All the primary bases are marked on the map, and you get a quick explanation of what they are: major port, minor port, and so on. Now, they have simplified this very slightly, because in the older map, the map from about 2000, early 2000s, they used to mark out air bases as well. And another thing this map doesn't have is they used to mark out the merchant fleet routes for people who went on raiding missions. Is particularly important for the Central Powers. They could throw occasional surface raids and certainly more U-boat raids in the direction of commerce coming in and out of the British Isles. Here you can still conduct those missions, but the main shipping lanes are not marked on the map. So that's an interesting change. I suppose they did that to declutter the map a bit. And I suppose it does that, but you still get fairly crowded areas, particularly in the area of the Channel. What else? There is a lot in this box. This is helpfully enough, it tells you the Naval Tactical Map. So this map, which I'll unfold so you can see it in its glorious entirety. This area, bound by the giant hexagon, is the equivalent of one square in the strategic map. So when your fleets meet on the strategic map, and you've finished maneuvering all your forces on the strategic map, if any of your fleets make contact, they get ported over to this one. So what happens in effect is that your fleet marker remains on the strategic map, and whatever ships you may have in that particular fleet move to this. So you're effectively zooming in, so you've got tactical control of the battle. We have some cardboard. There's a lot of cardboard. The first two, and they are the same, the first two, are your fleet cards. So the idea is that each number on this corresponds to a fleet counter. So you take your ship counters and you stack them on these cards out of sight of your opponent, preferably, unless you want to give them an easy afternoon. I don't recommend it. And these just help you keep track of which ships are in which formation as you maneuver them around the map. This game can get a bit of a big footprint because to keep those out of sight of your opponent, you sometimes have to place them fairly far away, or at least behind something so they're out of sight. Or you could just play with someone you trust and try really hard not to look, but that's difficult. This being perhaps the first major naval war that had a hefty air element, you also have these. Now, these are magnificent. These are the air operations cards. And people familiar with their history will recognize the plethora of British seaplane carriers, the famous converted passenger ferries and steamers of various stripes. There's the Conte Rosso, which an Italian liner, which ended up becoming HMS Argus. There's the cruiser Vindictive, Furious, Hermes. Furious in different guises, in fact, because she was reconstructed a few times. And of course, the famous Campania, the Cunard liner of 1893 that was bought and turned into a seaplane carrier. Everybody's present for the party. And let's not forget Germany and Russia. The Russians get the Orlitsa, often left out of most narratives of the First World War at sea. That's a very impressive touch. I like that. The Germans get a ton of ships which never actually quite made it into effective service. I mean, the liner Ausonia, was considered for conversion to some sort of carrier, but hardly anything was done, or at least nothing useful in that direction. So you can get her in the game, but this is a bit fanciful. But, you know, it gives the Germans some options, which is nice. Lastly, you get the series rules. And if you're wondering why you can see USS Olympia on the front, it's because the basic series rules for the Great War at Sea series, it began as a surface combat system primarily, and dozens of titles later, the series covers everything from the Spanish-American War, which I believe is still its earliest conflict, all the way up to the Second World War, and it comprises a mix of historical scenarios and lots of add-ons for what-ifs, some of them really quite fanciful, but still rather fun. So that's the series rules. They're none too thick. They only cover about, how many pages have we got here? 18 pages of rules, and that's the basics. The much thicker tomes you get in the game are the hit record sheets for both sides. Now, this is where the game does get quite involved. So just to show you one page of these, and you can photocopy these for your own use. So these are the hit record sheets for each ship. And appropriately enough, the list is headed by HMS Dreadnought, the great grandmummy of all the dreadnoughts. And you've got boxes for your primary, secondary, tertiary armament, any torpedoes, your hull and your fuel boxes. And these are all color-coded. The darker the shading, the thicker the armor. And armor comes in 3 grades, you know, non-existent, light, heavy. So you have these record sheets, which you tick off as fuel is expended and ships get damaged, for pretty much every ship included in the game. And there are a lot of them. So this goes into pages and pages, but effectively you get 42 pages worth of ships. And my favorite bit, the scenarios, excuse me, sorry. So this scenario book is immense, 44 scenarios altogether, and it's a mix of what they call battle scenarios, where you don't bother with the strategic map, you just go straight into the tactical combat map. Or you can play what they call the operational scenarios, where there's an awful lot of strategic map movement and you have strategic level objectives that you have to achieve, and these could involve mine laying, escorting troop convoys, bombarding an enemy coastline, or conducting a raid, that sort of thing. But there is so much replayability in this. And the scenarios range from tiny actions between a handful of ships all the way through to absolutely massive confrontations, including Jutland. The Battle of Jutland is here, of course, in its entirety. But I'll wave one of the bigger ones at you. So the December 1914 raid on Scarborough. There's the German lineup, and you get all their dreadnoughts too, because of course the High Seas Fleet was standing by as a backstop, and of course the British, the Grand Fleet, can react out of its bases, so you can end up with a lot of ships in play. The last thing, another thing for you to photocopy and use, is the player log sheet. So this is what you use to track the movement of your fleet counters, your fleet markers in advance. Yes, I'm afraid there's another layer there. So you have a partial fog of war. Both players can see the strategic map. They can see where each other's fleet counters are on it. There are one or two dummy counters in some scenarios to cause confusion, but you never quite know where these fleets are going to go, because depending on your mission, you have to plot your movement of all your task forces a certain degree in advance. So a fleet that is given a bombardment mission, for example, or a mine-laying mission, has to plot the entirety of its moves to the point of delivery, whether you're lobbing shells at a town or doing some other nefarious thing, and then you have to plot your route home. A fleet setting out on an intercept mission only needs to plot three turns in advance, so you have a bit more flexibility. Now, if you're a fleet with a full pre-plotted mission, once you encounter an enemy force, you can then rethink, recalculate, maybe even cancel the mission and go home if it's looking a bit bad. There's a lot of choice in this game, but there's also a fair bit of paperwork, as you can see. So that is a quick summary of everything you get in the game. I'm just going to come back to the ship counters, because to be honest, they were the first thing that caught my eye when I saw this over 20 years ago. So I just want to dwell on them a little bit. Now, the counters themselves are a bit too small. I think if I tried to hold them in front of the camera, you just get lots of blurry in, out, in, out. So I'm going to do the next best thing, which is get this map out again and just point out, I don't know if you can see HMS Britannia over there with her name slightly misspelled. Well, they helpfully have stuck a reminder there showing you all the elements on a ship counter. So as you can see, it helpfully details the ship's armament and its speed, which is pretty much the main bit of information that you need to see at a glance. The rest of it you can refer to the ship's record sheet. That sounds like you have to do a bit of toing and froing. You do at first, but once you get used to it, it becomes second nature. And of course, there's the lovely nature of the ship counters themselves. I'll come back to this nice picture of a whole gang of them. Look at those lovely illustrations. They are absolutely gorgeous. Avalanche Press Games really did themselves proud with this series, because the artwork on those counters is absolutely superb. And the ships are very realistically rendered. Now, one thing I do need to check in this edition is whether they've got all the ship images correct, because in the original edition, they did get their artwork a little bit wrong. And even famous ships like the British light cruiser HMS Southampton, when you looked closely at her counter in the older set, she actually had the print of a Minotaur class armored cruiser, so clearly she'd taken some steroids before coming out. But things like that are really quite minor, because to be perfectly honest, in a game involving hundreds and hundreds of ships, I'll happily forgive them the odd, misprinted image, because image might have been wrong on that original Southampton, but the stats were correct. And at the end of the day, that's what you really need. So much for the contents of the box. How does the game play? Well, I'll be very delighted to show you in different stages over the next videos in this series, because that's going to bring back some very happy memories for me. I've not played this for a while. So in the next video, I'll start by looking at the ship-to-ship tactical combat system, because that has a certain degree of variety and it deserves a video on its own. And we'll move on from there to how the strategic element works. So I look forward to putting those together for you. In the meantime, thank you very much for bearing with me, because I know there's been a bit of a gap between this and my previous video. Sorry. I really look forward to doing the next ones. Oh, yeah, sorry. Sorry. I look forward to doing the next ones for you. And as always, thank you very much for watching this, for following this series. I hope you found this video interesting. If you're considering getting this game, I hope you find the rest of the series interesting. Thank you very much again for joining me. I always appreciate your company, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Take care. Bye.